It's been a couple of days since the release of Hiyuki, and after doing a bunch of testing with her, I can finally get out my fully formed thoughts. So starting off with her performance in Tower, then her performance in Whimpering Wastes, then the value she brings in End State Matrix, and then finally I'm gonna go past the points I made in my pros and cons video to see if I was right about her or not. So as for her performance in Tower, it's about what you'd expect. Oh boy, a new Wuthering Waves character came out. I sure do wonder how they're going to make a complete joke of Tower of Adversity this time. Because yet again we have ourselves a DPS character who makes the Tower of Adversity look like her absolute playground. Because of course Tower is the most bog standard of an endgame that you're going to get. It doesn't really have that many requirements outside of simply doing a lot of damage. And guess what Hiyuki is very good at doing? Yep. You guessed that right, a lot of damage. However, Hiyuki is not completely devoid of things to talk about, because the main thing I felt within Tower of Adversity is the usage of her EI. For those unfamiliar with the character, EI is the big dashing move that Hiyuki does, where most often you're going to see her dash 3 times in a row, and then she does the big forte heavy attack. My issue, however, is not so much with EI itself, rather it's based on the trigger condition. In order to use EI, she must enter the EI stance, which you can do in a variety of ways, but one of those ways is to use a dodge after using a basic attack. Which means that it actually can happen pretty easily that you are in the middle of your basic attack string and you try to dodge a boss attack, but you mistimed it just slightly, so now you are in the EI stance, and you're forced to use your EIs, and then you're gonna have to enter the EI stance later again to finish off your rotation, which does waste a little bit of time. Additionally, this can break your combo, which is actually pretty important, because Hiyuki's 3rd, 4th, and 5th basic attack within her ultimate apply a stack of Glacio Shave. And because of Hiyuki's unique mechanic, that turns into Glacio Bite, which means it does actually do some noticeable damage, especially if you're running her in her best team with Chisa. So ultimately, while it's not some kind of insane deal, it can definitely be a bit of an inconvenience. Outside of that, there's really not that much to say about Hiyuki within Tower of Adversity, other than, man, this Hiyuki champion is kind of a good champion. But I wouldn't say we're exactly in a shortage of good DPS characters, so while she is definitely in the upper echelons, I don't think she's particularly groundbreaking or anything. And that gets me to Whimpering Wastes, where I do actually have some notes. First, I want to start off by saying that Hiyuki in Whimpering Wastes is incredibly strong, being one of the best Whimpering Waste DPSs we've gotten in quite a while. And I think a big reason for that is that Hiyuki is not a bog standard hyper carry, and she also does not specialize in Toon Break. Bog standard hyper carries suffer from the issue that they don't really do much damage consistently throughout the entire team rotation. They mainly load all of their damage within their own DPS window, which means that during your sub DPS's window and your supports window, you're not killing any waves, which is rather inefficient for the game mode. And Toon Break characters just automatically struggle in multi-wave because in order to get their effects going, they need to actually break the enemy first. For Toon Rupture characters, their Toon Rupture damage is also heavily decreased against common enemies, and Toon Strain characters are going to suffer from uptime problems. Hiyuki has neither of these issues, although she technically does suffer because Lene is a Toon Break character, but she's not going to stay in the Hiyuki team forever. Hiyuki has good AoE, and also has pretty consistent damage throughout her rotation. Well, at least sort of. Most of Hiyuki's damage is centered in a couple of nukes, but it's kinda like Sigrika, where the nukes are not just a one-time tick of damage, rather they are a continuous source of damage that isn't just immediately all used up, which means you are able to kill multiple waves with that one nuke. Additionally, because of Glacio Bite, her basic attacks can also contribute to killing waves because Glacio Bite damage is actually pretty solid. I've even seen some people solo Whimpering Wastes using only Hiyuki, however they were using the shield token that is definitely not going to stay after her banner's gone. So don't expect the solo runs to be looking as impressive without the shield token. However, without that she should still be fine. Her best team currently is running Chisa and Lene, both of which have pretty good damage on their own. So you are going to be running a team with 3 characters that are all going to be doing significant amounts of damage. Additionally, Hiyuki's signature Glacio Chafe support is most likely going to have pretty frequent Glacio Chafe application to fully abuse the Glacio Bite mechanic. So ultimately, I think Hiyuki is going to be a very good investment for WhiWa. She is not without flaw, however, because there definitely are some things that I noticed while playing her. The main thing being the fact that her EI will sometimes just completely whiff. This is because if you just spam the button input, you're most likely going to be missing some of your EIs because you will have killed one wave and then use the next EI before the next wave has time to spawn in, which means you're essentially targeting nothing. And while Hiyuki does have this problem with a bunch of her other abilities, I don't exactly think it's going to be a big deal for the character within the game mode. It's just going to require a little bit of adjustment when you play the character in Whimpering Wastes, and that's kind of it. Especially since the Glacio Chafe support is most likely going to have a very long duration outro skill. So you don't need to be concerned with how long her rotation is taking once that support is out. Then for her value within Matrix, I think Hiyuki is a very interesting character, let's just say that. Because it really depends on what your account looks like. If you have Imeth, the value of Hiyuki currently is going to immediately plummet, simply because Imeth with a Lene should be getting you more value than Hiyuki with a Lene. And in order to get past this, you're gonna need to make some workarounds. If you want to play Fusion Burst Imeth, you're gonna have to give up your Hiyuki's Chisa to Imeth. And if you want to get Lucilla for Hiyuki, you're gonna need to make sure that you have Chisa on your account, because otherwise the Hiyuki Lucilla team is most likely going to lose a significant amount of performance. Additionally, you could run Lupa with Imeth, however, considering Lupa's low ownership rate, I don't think many people are going to be able to do that. So when it comes to Matrix, Hiyuki is a character that entirely depends on what your account currently looks like. If your Lene is free, Hiyuki is going to be a very good character to add to your Matrix roster. However, she most likely isn't, so you're gonna want to have the Glacio Chafe core open. Now finally, to talk about the points I made in my pros and cons video, starting with the fact that Hiyuki was going to be our best Glacio DPS, which, well, the competition is kind of in hell, so this one was going to be obvious. I'm not going to give myself props for getting this one right because you could see it even if you were standing on the moon. Second, I said that she was going to make Chisa a better character, which, in a way, is very true. Chisa is definitely her best in slot character. However, I'm not gonna go and say that Chisa is particularly needed to play Hiyuki. Hiyuki is one of Chisa's best use cases, but I don't think that Chisa is really needed. So if you want a team where Chisa is undeniably the best in slot, Hiyuki might be the play for you. Then I said that Hiyuki doesn't need any negative status teammates, which is definitely true. The way I know this is because I've been doing all of my testing running the Lene Mornia core, and she's definitely been doing very well. So even as a negative status character, she doesn't need to have negative status teammates to actually perform, something incredibly rare among negative status characters. So big props to Hiyuki. I also said that her multi-wave was going to be unique because she's able to store the stacks that power up her ultimate. And while this one is true, I definitely expected it to have more of an impact on combat. I definitely did see the difference between a 1-stack and a 2-stack ultimate, however it didn't really have a big difference in terms of clear time. It simply helps you conserve some damage if you're about to kill the enemy. But the situations in which that happens is pretty niche, so while it is a very unique aspect to her kit, I don't think it's a particularly important one. And then for my negative, I said that Lene is very contested, which matters a lot for Hiyuki because Hiyuki gets a lot out of Lene. And while Hiyuki can definitely use Zhezhe, the only people that realistically will have Zhezhe is the ones who mained Carlotta back in the day, or the ones who mained Jinchi back in the day. They both work. But that's irrelevant to the current argument. Hiyuki's current best in slot is Lene, and Lene just so happens to be an incredibly contested unit that almost every DPS in the game can get a use out of, with one of those DPSs being Imeth, and as we all know, Imeth is incredibly powerful. When we put them into a neutral environment, Imeth is definitely going to be stronger than Hiyuki. So you're gonna end up sacrificing your Imeth in order to use your Hiyuki, and if that's worth it or not depends entirely on you. Of course, this is something that entirely depends on the account, and I can't speak for everyone, but I am gonna say that I was right on this. But that's just my thoughts on Hiyuki. Let me know what you think of her down in the comments below. And while you're down there, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Additionally, if you have any questions, be sure to join my Discord server, which is linked down in the description. And that'll be all from me. Peace.